Let's bring in the country's most watched political panel. That issue is with us today. Both Chantal and Andrew are in the lockup. We're in the lockup throughout the day listening to the Finance Department officials. Bruce was kind of drinking it all in from the outside, so we got the inside and the outside perspective. Let's go inside first. Andrew, your thoughts on budget 2015?
Well, it's a pre-election budget, so it could have been a lot worse, I guess. This is a very modest, very cautious budget for the most part. A lot of it's pretty small beer stuff. In previous times, we might have expected governments to go on a big spending spree. I think if you look at the sort of arc of the last few years, I think the government has a reasonable story to tell about bringing the budget back into balance. The fact that they specifically say we balance it this year, and you can point to ways in which they kind of engaged in jiggery poker to get there, doesn't really matter that much. It's the trend that's really important, and I think they've got a reasonable story to tell there. On the other hand, most of the sort of micro measures in the budget here, all this sort of fiddling stuff for this industry or that industry, I think would be better advised to do without. But again, I come back to the point, it's an election year.
Chantal?
I think they were trying to put flesh, even flesh that you're not really going to see or get to touch for a number of years, around the fact that this budget is really about a fairly significant tax cut. That may not be a massive spending spree, but the whole exercise seems to have been that the government promised significant tax cuts to families in November and spent the months that followed trying to juggle the drop in oil prices, a change in its circumstances, so that it could come up with a reasonable budget that showed that they could actually afford the tax cuts that they'd already signed up for. And so I think basically that's what today was about. The rest, I've rarely seen a budget that announces so many things where you look at the column for this year or even next year and it's blank because nothing's happening for the next 2 years.
Bruce?
Well, Peter, I know that there are a lot of people who won't like this budget, have already expressed their dissatisfaction with it. But if I think about that kind of 5 to 10 or 15 voters out of 100 who are going to make the difference in this election campaign, to me, this budget actually looks fairly politically adept. I don't think those voters are saying it should have been bigger. I don't think they're going to spend a lot of time wondering exactly how we got to surplus or why the government is pushing some of its expenditures out further into the future. I think they're going to look at it and say, this government has established that it is for lower taxes. And in that sense, I think this is really signaling that we're in playoff hockey, to use a kind of a current metaphor. The government has brought its A game to the country today, and the opposition parties are going to have to step up their game. For them, I think it's going to be a question of whether or not they're better to bury this budget than to talk about it, because there are some things in it, obviously, that those mainstream voters will find appealing.
Does it come down, though, on that? Sorry, go ahead, Chantal.
Peter, I don't think the opposition parties can bury this budget for the very simple reason that the most political part of it, the one that's going to pay off in votes, the Conservatives hope, is going to show up in the shape of checks on the doorsteps of every family with children under 18 in this country on July 1st. So even if in 3 days we don't talk about the budget, and I suspect we won't, what payoff the Conservatives are hoping to get from it is going to be coming on July 1st.
I guess what I'm saying about that, Peter, is that I agree with that is going to have an impact. But the question in my mind is it going to make people think, oh, this was a bad idea, the Liberals and the NDP are right, that this is just a tax break for the rich? Or is it going to make them think, oh, the government of the day is for lower taxes and putting more money in my pocket? And I guess I think more the latter.
So what are you suggesting then, that they should sort of basically embrace those checks, the opposition as well, and just move on to the areas that they want to focus on?
They should spend less time talking about the government's ideas as being bad ideas and replace that conversation with, here's what we would do that would be better. But
they've been left very little wiggle room to do to argue what they would do that would be better, because there's no money left in the till unless they're willing to start making the argument of deficit financing and a stimulative deficit. And we know those things don't necessarily go over that well. Andrew?
Well, that's right. I mean, this has sometimes been presented as some sort of dirty pool by the government, but in fact what this is presenting people with is a democratic choice. So the government has taken the route of saying we're going to put the money back into the public's hands. The opposition, which would like to spend that money on various projects, and they may well be good projects to spend on, are now going to have to make the case of either raising taxes to do so or going into deficit to do so. Those are perfectly honorable choices, but it's just no actual free lunch for them to be able to do it on the backs of the previous government's fiscal situation.
Or cutting spending in other areas.
It is possible for the opposition. It is possible for the opposition parties to selectively say there are some of those tax cuts that we will not implement. And some of those tax cuts, I'm not talking about the child benefit check, but income splitting and the TSFA doubling of the limit are clearly targeted. When you make the argument that who has $10,000 left net at the end of the year to put in a savings account, most families will say, not me. So you can selectively do that. You can also do what Stephen Harper did in 2011, which was to say, if you vote for me and things go well, in 4 years I will deliver this, that, and that. That is exactly what he did and got elected on, and that's exactly what he's doing today.
All right. All right, we're going to leave it at that. I'm still fascinated by the thing you said in your initial answer, Chantal, because I think it's going to be very interesting to watch the advertising program, the optics of the way they try to sell this budget, whether they're upfront in the selling about how many of these things don't even happen this year, don't even happen next year. They're into 2017 and later, but they put them in the window as promises that they are delivering on in this budget as if they were coming right now. It'll be interesting to see how that's played. Sorry, go ahead, Andrew.
Which is what they did in 2011, right? In 2011, They said when we balance the budget 4 years from now, we'll give you income splitting and whatever the other one was. It's worked for them in the past, and they hope to work for it in the future.
It's hard for us to argue, to criticize the government for not giving us a long-term sense of what they want to do, and then when they do give us a long-term sense of what they want to do, say, well, this is all too far out into the future for us to take into account.
Yeah, no, I hear you. It's just the way you sell it, whether you're always mentioning that it's well off into the future. But I hear you, and I'm sure we'll discuss this at length at a different time as well, including tonight, when there's a special ad issue tonight on the National. So, Andrew, Chantal, and Bruce, we thank you all for now. We'll see you a little later on this evening.